backlog, while at the same time working with the present situation in kind of a meaningful way. What I find also is that because we have a lack of information, we have a lack of history, we also have a lack of ability to see kind of a future that we want with our regulatory frameworks here. So the political leadership in information policy topics in the European Parliament is incredibly weak. Most people are unable to set any specific course that they want to take, and we completely favor neutral terminologies. We want to be technology neutral, we don't want to benefit anyone in particular, even if not benefiting somebody in particular or not making particular choices would lead to society developing in a way that we might not actually find desirable. My solution for this problem with the Parliament specifically would be that as long as there is a citizen demand for, or voter demand in particular, for making more concrete choices, like if you force the publicly elected officials to make positions on where they want to go with technology policy or information policy, then surely they would eventually have to follow the voters. But as many of you are probably aware, it is also not always difficult to, it's not always easy to mobilize a large enough number of people for it to be actually politically effective. When you look at democratic systems, then because there are many voters in the member states, you would need to have considerable backing for your cause before governing party, like a leading political party in your country, actually starts feeling threatened by your mobilization. If I understood Nadia correctly when we spoke before the event, there are some particular topics which would be more interesting for you to hear from me than others. So I propose to Nadia that whatever topics you want to raise with me, please, you can raise. I think it is more rewarding also for you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go very quickly over what to expect from this day and how we're gonna work together. So, as you all know, over the past year, we've been engaging in thousands of discussions about how we're navigating the current context that we're in, the socioeconomic climate, how we're managing making a living, how we're managing our learning, our relationships, how we're managing to create and care for commons, and so on. And out of these discussions, we synthesized a number of recommendations. These recommendations basically picked up some of the common obstacles that we have amongst us as people many of whom are trying radically innovative approaches towards addressing some of the challenges in our personal lives or in our communities. And on the basis of these obstacles, we looked at how would you remove them? How would you remove this obstacle? And that is what we call the recommendations. We came up with a number of them, and then we said, okay, this is quite a general idea. One of those areas was innovation. One of the questions was, why do institutions only seem to trust organizations to be able to collaborate, to build big things, or to innovate? Another one of those questions had to do with process. So a lot of people in the EDGERYDERS community essentially engage in process innovation. What do I mean by this? It means that a lot of us are not maybe engaged in product innovation, but in the kinds of innovation that has distributed benefits. And it means that the way we work has implications for what measures and what kinds of support would be meaningful and actually remove obstacles that come across our way. So we picked two of those broad recommendations on the basis of where we could find people within the European institutions who know enough about them so that we can have a meaningful discussion about, okay, so this is what we want to happen. How? How do we get there? What questions do the solutions need to answer? What decisions have to be made by whom? At what level? And who are the stakeholders that you would have to align interests of in order for this to actually happen? The three areas are, one is innovation policy. So we're asking, can we rewire innovation policy in Europe so that it's not only organizations that are trusted to be able to innovate around some of our most pressing challenges, but individuals. And the second one is, how do we support bottom-up social infrastructures and support structures? And the third one, which we have, is why can't we seem to be able to deal with the challenge of the unpaid internships? Everybody knows they're bad, but we can't seem to deal with it. So what I wanted to ask you, Amelia, is just you shared a document on the Facebook group about social innovation funding, it's earmarked. And we read through it, and some of us had a conversation about it, and this document, which says that basically money is earmarked, the European Parliament wants money, capital, to be earmarked for social innovation. It seems to be suggesting that the thing holding back social innovation is capital. But, you know, how does innovation happen? Is it just a spark of an idea and then short-term support? Or is it an incremental process? We have, legal structures in place to support product innovation, but not process innovation. And what's more, you look at the timeline of process innovation, it's different than for product innovation. So typically what this community is suggesting are things that are not capital intensive, but they do require commitment over long periods of time and support. And what would your reaction to this be? Is it feasible?
You're talking about, I guess, the social venture capital or so, that social funding that we approved this spring. You raise actually an incredibly large amount of issues here. So how to influence the institutions? There are, of course, more or less effective ways that you can influence the institutions. When you're working with the European Parliament, because as I said, our infrastructure is not such that we have a lot of long-term commitment here. In order to follow a policy field and be able to make a relevant contribution to the development of legislation for society at the European level, you need to have a lot of backlog. Because if you don't have the backlog, you never know if you're making a proposal which is kind of redundant. And very often, actually, the Parliament makes completely redundant proposals and conclusions because they're things that have already been tried, and they kind of sound like a good idea, but you know it's been implemented already and that it didn't work, but the Parliament isn't really able to gather a sufficient overview of the policy field to determine that. And it's because we deal with legislative proposals in the space of like 4 or 5 months. We get the proposal here from the Commission, somebody is appointed to deal with the proposal, and then our process is finalized within actually a very short time. So when you interact with the European Parliament on a specific proposal, the most relevant issue is to be timely and like identify who to speak to and about what, essentially. Now, one of the things that I have realized also when you work with people outside of the Parliament is that in some way, like, we inside of the Parliament are vulnerable because of our lack of resources to be expertiseful in a field. But people who have a lot of expertise and a lot of experiences with a particular policy field also sometimes are vulnerable in that they don't realize what is the relevant information to give to the institutions at what time. So the best thing for people outside of the parliament would always to know somebody inside of the parliament who can tell what is relevant to tell whom at what time. And that requires a bit of mutual trust. And it requires also, well, particularly that you trust each other's judgments. And this would be like one of the most concrete examples from my recent political life is the Public Sector Information Directive proposal, where in the European Parliament the debates on whether or not to charge marginal price or give away public data for free was an incredibly intense battle. So at the time when we had reached the political compromise, there were still many interest groups outside of the parliament who felt that we should give data away for free rather than provide it at marginal price. Only, of course, the fragile political kind of compromise agreement that existed in the parliament at that time didn't make it convenient to, in the last 4 weeks of the process, reinsert the idea of free data. So that wouldn't have been possible, but what would have been possible and what was possible at that time was to get the parliament to support open formats. So the advice that I gave to people at that time was, please write to the responsible MEPs, but write to them about open formats. And the marginal price thing, I think it's not the right time to affect this anymore. Luckily that kind of went okay, so we didn't completely remove marginal price from the public sector because many MEPs also wanted there to be a possibility to charge considerably more than marginal price, but we're now kind of back at the Commission proposal, and we also have a weak preference for open formats in, as opposed to the non-preference for open formats that the Parliament actually wanted to introduce. But things like that are difficult. Like how do you determine what is the right information to put in whose hands at what time? How do you make the assessment of who is best able to influence a particular decision? And I don't know any other way than to know somebody in the institution who works with a proposal who would be able to make an assessment. But of course, that also puts a lot of responsibility on the people inside of the institution, because what if you give the wrong recommendation? If you had, like, maybe actually the marginal price also could have been one. I will never know, because I recommended against trying to take that fight since it didn't seem plausible to me, but essentially that is also my judgment. So that interaction is difficult. The other point that you brought up, I see as a problem of formalization. I was at a Christmas mingling party with the young Swedish teetotalers earlier this week, and they were very proud about the decision that they had made at their annual congress to do 70,000 hours of study groups in the next 2 years. Well, I mean, do you laugh at this? And they also said that, yeah, because in our previous experiences with having organizational work, we had only 13,000 hours of study groups, and now the annual congress is like, buff this up to 70,000. So all of our administrators are now super worried that we will not make this goal. But actually, they said, in the past, we used to not keep registers of when we met and for how long and what we did during that time. So we believe that only by formalizing our current meetings, our present activities, we can already reach this target with very little effort. The reasons that our innovation policy works the way it does is because we as institutions have increasingly the need to measure what we do. And in order to measure what is done, there needs to be some kind of formal registration. And this formal registration can come, for instance, in the form of a patent, or in the form of a grant application, or a project report, or whatever it is that you want, like, why we want formalization? It is in order for us to be able to point back to that which we did a few years later and said, look, we did this, it is on the paper here, it has been registered, it is here. We have the same thing in many other areas of society, and this also is, I mean, essentially, yes, I agree with you, not everything needs to be formalized, maybe, and maybe we are a bit too keen on making very exact measurements of exactly what we do and what we don't do. But for the public institutions also, of course, it is relevant for us to be able to show that we have done something meaningful for the lives of citizens. if you were a citizen outside of the European Parliament and we didn't keep any records of having meetings like, for instance, this, wouldn't you feel slightly insecure about whether or not we were actually disposing of our things in the right way? And the same thing with like when you make a public funding grant for innovation policy. Of course, at some point the taxpayer is going to want to know whether or not their money was spent in a useful way or not. And how would you show that other than by making a formalization of the tax money spent? With a bottom-up structuring, the problem with the bottom-up structuring is that the European Parliament, being a supranational parliament with 754 deputies, might not be the best way to start bottom-up, because we're pretty much as high up as they go. Like, the supranational institutions are beyond the level of the member state, and society engagement somehow needs to come also from the society. Now, what we could do, and what political leaders in the European Parliament could and should be doing to a much larger extent, is show political leadership. If we could have parliamentarians that identified relevant political conflicts for society, like what are the values I want to impose on my society, which kind of world would I like for people to live in, and then make choices thereafter, because we do not have this. A thing like open formats, for instance, is a very decisive choice for how you want the society to look in maybe 20 years. With an open format, you are much more likely to have actually access to the data that you put in the format 20 years previous than with a closed format. But the European Parliament has passed this off as a kind of technical choice. It's something that you choose in the administration of the local municipality, and it doesn't matter for the future of the continent. And the fact that we pass the ideological choices off as technicalities, while at the same time having very, very long discussions, either on kind of irrelevant things like if we encourage the European institutions to act in the same way as the local municipalities, is that a subsidiarity issue? What does it mean to make a binding guideline as opposed to a non-binding guideline? Or should we issue recommendations or make proposals? Those discussions can take hours and hours, and they're not really ideological at all, and they don't describe any kind of problem that society has or a solution to those problems. But here, again, like I said, what you need is for then bottom-up sort of somebody in society, or preferably many, many people, to say, like, listen, you need to make choices. That we have our political institutions are increasingly unable to make political choices. And maybe that is also actually because society is quite large and very diverse, so it's not even certain that most entities in society would make the same policy recommendation choices that you've made. And that is a challenge for us also. We hear many points of views, many of them which aren't along these lines at all. Most people would argue we need more formalization in order to keep better track of our public institutions, for instance.
So, I would ask one thing on the basis of this is a personal ask actually. It's that I think we need to find ways so one of the things I've been experiencing with EDGERYDERS is that I'm getting a lot of people getting in touch and saying, oh, it's this amazing, smart people, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and how can we tap into that, and how can we be a part of that? And it's so tempting, I think, to try to exploit that, but I think we need investment in ways, in finding ways to monetize these insights and skills and capabilities who have experience in processes. In process innovation has distributed benefits. That it's not about products, but that is somehow, in some way, innovating, and the benefits are distributed beyond what you can easily somehow close off. So this would be my ask, because I think it's important. And I think there's a huge pool of undervalued talent and capabilities and skills that are not out there, and that are out there but don't receive recognition for the great work that they do and the value to society. And this I think is very important. So with this, if there are any questions.
Yeah. As you were speaking, Amelia, I was tweeting that you might be the first politician I ever spoke to that really understand Kantberg's first law, which means that technology is not good, nor bad, nor neutral. The reason why we're here is to take charge of that part. The choices that look like technical choices, but in fact they cast a shadow on the future and on what kind of society we're designing. So the idea behind the session, as I understand it, is to, as citizens, as ordinary citizens in Europe, take on the full complexity of making the technical choices and trying to understand the shadow they cast on the future. So we would argue that a policy participatory process is not complete until you do that. Do you see a realistic role for the public opinion, for citizens to get involved at this level, or are we just a bunch of crazy people from the internet?
Yeah, so I want to believe in my heart that everything is possible, and that if you want to make a change, you can make a change. And in particular, I believe that if voters if the people who eventually go to the ballots are able to hold their politicians accountable for the technical choices they make or do not make, then yes, of course you can change. Because if we are going to have a society built on values, which inevitably we will have to have, then the citizens and those who go to vote will have to kind of decide which values they want their politicians to advocate. And I don't think that I would be able to get out of bed in the morning if I thought that wasn't possible. But I also realize that it's difficult to do, and it's difficult for us also. I don't think that I'm the only politician who understands the importance of making also technological choices and society choices. So there is definitely like a small group of entities, even in the European Parliament, who would be able to reflect upon their ability to make decisions about information topics and how we structure technological solutions for, I don't know, identity and signatures and copyright and culture and innovation and all of these things. But there's not maybe enough of us to change the inertia of the institution. And in order for us to change more radically the inertia, we need also for voters to make more radical choices. And how to accomplish that, like the only thing I can do is try to engage in public debates, right? So I was thinking about also with the monetization of distributed efforts. I think nobody would be happier if that was done than me. And also some other people in this parliament would certainly be incredibly pleased if we could monetize distributed efforts. But it's also not entirely obvious how to do that. And you will have reached this problem also, I guess. My kind of baseline assumption is somewhere like the formalization processes for our economy might be actually wrong. And how to change that type of inertia in an institution as large as society, because then you're talking way beyond the parliament, right? So it's not just about electing your 754 MEPs, but also kind of larger society, basically every society institution. And this I do not see as a feasible objective for the European Parliament to take on. That is really something that you would have to build or form elsewhere.
Okay, so gonna ask the facilitators who are running the individual sessions to very quickly present themselves, because after this we're going to go off into the breakout sessions and just get working on fleshing out the general recommendations. And I don't know what your schedule is like, Amelia. Maybe you're rushing off somewhere, I'm guessing. But thank you so much for taking time and effort to welcome us and to engage in this conversation. So thank you.
Can I make a short announcement first? The European Commission at DG Markt just opened a consultation on the Intellectual Property Rights Enforcement Directive. So if you're very interested in innovation policy and formalization processes of innovation or creativity, I would make an effort to track that consultation down and try to reply. Also help other people to find the consultation and reply to the consultation. It will be open until the 30th of March 2012. So the time is kind of short, but this is the time when you have an ability to make an impact. And if you do make an impact and you make it known to me, I will ensure that I hold the Commission accountable, and my office holds the Commission accountable for what they put in the summary of the consultation responses afterwards. So it will be followed up, at least until 2014. The second request on the same topic is, yesterday, I got the impression from the Commissioner Michel Barnier, who is responsible for the internal market, that he does not want to look at the exceptions and limitations schemes in copyright. I think it would be incredibly useful at this time to pressure the Commission into looking further at the exceptions and limitations schemes in the Information Society Directive from 2001. So we need to create sufficient inertia before 2014 in order for the next Commissioner, because I gave up on this one already, to want to look at that particular aspect. I think also we need to get rid of the perception that exceptions and limitations weaken copyright. This is not true. Exceptions and limitations introduce legitimacy into the copyright system, which makes copyright stronger. If anyone has any further questions on either the IPRA consultation or on the campaign to open up the InfoSoc directive in a way that it could actually be made beneficial to society, you are welcome to get in touch with me or anyone at my office, and we will do whatever we can to help you. Thank you.
Can you tweet this link for the staff so we can follow up also individually?
Just do it. Sorry.
Good man.
Can I ask a question about what you just said? All those suggestions that we might actually write in, would they be transparent to other people? Can other people see what suggestions have been placed or not during the time in which suggestions are being written, not after?
Well, the legislative processes here are very long. Consultation responses, we have a Commission representative here who might be more able to tell how it technically works with these forms, because I was told when I called the Commission that the consultation responses will be public, but I know that this is the case when you transmit a document. I don't know if this is the case also for the individual responses entered into an interface with the boxes and the ticking options. Do you know?
Unfortunately, I don't know, because that depends on the DG, which is implementing the consultation. So, in the consultations we have run, normally we publish all the contributions received, the moment they are received. But I don't know how DG Markt is handling this consultation. I think you can immediately see if you go on the website.
Thank you.
Okay, so